8 months had passed since the birth of Carlitos, fruit of the love between Pedro and Janet. Even though the living conditions were very hard, his driving force was always his baby. They lived in an old building, deteriorated by years and oblivion. The peeling walls and the roof that leaked on rainy nights could not erase Janet's smile when she looked at her son Carlitos, with his small face always illuminating her gloomy world. Pedro, for his part, woke up every morning with the weight of despair on his shoulders, but he strove to maintain hope and well-being at home. The love he felt for his son and his wife was the only thing that kept his life afloat in that sea of difficulties that he had to overcome day after day. Work seemed to be scarce, money did not cover the bills, everything became more difficult, but Peter, he never gave up. The nights were the hardest. The lack of food, the fear of not knowing how to face the next day. Janet often woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of Carlitos crying. Pedro, by her side, hugged her. They were hard nights, but above all, teaching for first-time parents who, despite the difficulties, enjoyed every second they spent with Carlitos. The hardest blow one morning, when Carlitos was only 8 months old, fate played the worst of tricks on them. While Pedro arrived from a very hard day of work, he did not imagine that in that precise moment, the family's life would change forever. Pedro ran to look for Janet and Carlitos, his little one. After feeling a strong explosion on the upper floor, causing collapses and strong flames that destroyed everything in its path, the fire got out of control, painting the sky with fiery colors while the smoke rose like a fierce specter. Pieces of rubble fell to the floor, rumbling, and inside, Pedro ran desperately down the hallway that was crumbling around him. Janet! Carlitos, he shouted with his heart beating a mile an hour, his eyes full of panic, but his mind focused on his duty to protect his family. Meanwhile, the building continued to give in to the fury of the fire. In the center of that hell, Pedro was holding a wooden beam with all his strength, fighting against the weight that threatened to crush him. Behind him, Janet advanced through the flames, firmly hugging Carlitos to her chest. Pedro's determination was clear in his expression, as he accepted his fate, allowing Janet to escape into the dim light at the end of the corridor. At that moment, a piece of debris fell on him, collapsing him. Janet screamed his name, but there was nothing she could do. Pedro, with his last breath, pushed his family out to safety, knowing he could not escape. Life after Peter. Janet, trembling, with Carlitos in her arms, went outside. The heat of the fire burned the air, but her only thought was to save her son. The chaos was absolute, but when he looked back, he saw how the flames consumed what was left of his home and, in his mind, something worse, he saw how Pedro was trapped in the fire from which he never emerged. In the distance you could hear the sirens of ambulances and firefighters that seemed to get closer and closer, but they arrived late. Everything was chaos in the surroundings, everything was reduced to ashes, many families lost their property. It was a night that destroyed many hearts, but above all that of Janet and Carlitos. The void that Pedro left was very big. The first year was the hardest. Trying to erase those consequences that lasted forever was a puzzle to solve. The images came and returned every night. Sleep seemed impossible to achieve. His only driving force was his son, who, despite to the pain, Janet always showed him a smile and gave him all the love possible. Over time, Janet found some peace. He couldn't erase Pedro's footprints, but he learned to live with his memory, a memory that lasted forever. The return to Peter's tomb. 10 years after the tragedy, Janet and Carlitos visited Pedro's grave. In their hands, they carried the most colorful and beautiful flowers, as usual. "Dad always takes care of us from heaven," Carlitos exclaimed. "Yes, son. Daddy always takes care of us," Janet emphasized with tears in her eyes. And although flowers cannot express what we feel when our hearts cry, they do. The light in the darkness, years passed, and the pain never completely disappeared, but life taught Janet and Carlitos to cope with it. Always, in their hearts, there was a light, the light of Peter's sacrifice. Although Carlitos grew up without knowing his father's face beyond photographs, he always knew who Pedro was. They talked to him about him. They told him stories of his bravery, his love for his family, and how, in that last act of sacrifice, Peter gave him life. In his adolescence, Carlitos planted a tree next to his father's grave, symbolizing eternal life, memories, and love that last forever in their hearts. Traveler's life gives us happy moments, unforgettable moments, but above all of pain, suffering, and loss. I only ask that we honor and take care of the memories of our loved ones, which will be the most valuable thing we take with us. May love accompany you. I hope to see you in another video from his channel, Time Travelers.